Welcome back to Human Resources for the People. It's a human capital revolution, and today we're going to be taking you north of the border to an interesting situation that came out a couple days ago. And you'll notice my awesome leaf. But in British Columbia, an employer was awarded damages for employee time theft captured by a time tracking software, which is really interesting. I This is probably possible in the United States, but I really don't know how. But what happened is so they have resolution tribunals that act as a court in ways uh, in Canada that resolves employee employer issues, especially surrounding discipline and termination. So the employee filed for wrongful dismissal, and on top of that, the employee had to pay $50, 50 hours worth of time theft as a result of a time tracking software program that effectively the employee was fired for. So to shorten that up, an employee was fired because they were falsifying time card. The time tracking software noted 50 hours that wasn't tracked, or the employee wasn't doing anything. The employee, after being fired, sued for wrongful dismissal and actually had to pay 50 hours of thefted time, which is amazing and I think quite rare, at least at least in America. So let's get into it. The employee was hired in September of 2021. The employee and employer agreed that they could work from home, and clearly, after 4 months, 5 months, they had weekly meetings to talk about how they had time management issues, that the accountant was not doing well with managing their own time. And as a result, they agreed, both the employee and the employer, they agreed to put a time tracking program on the laptop. And obviously, the employee knew about it. It continued. They were behind schedule and over budget. It was getting worse. Um, and when they started looking at a file that the employee had worked on, based on the time camp data, the time tracking software data, she found about 50 hours stolen where she did not appear to have spent on work related things. The employee then was given the opportunity to sort of explain away what had happened and just couldn't. There was nothing that could explain the time, or I think she refused to, actually, more specifically. And as a result of it, as a result of the theft of time, she was terminated effective as a result of this. Employee began to argue that time camp was difficult to use and that the program wasn't differentiating between personal time and work time. But it was found that time camp actually did differentiate the difference between work and personal and automatically recorded activities in a way that they could do that. Finally, Ms. Beast then began arguing that the employee began arguing that there were time spent working with paper copies of client documents that wouldn't be captured by the time tracking software. And Ms. Beast didn't tell the HR manager because she was she was afraid that they knew they didn't want to hear that, and she was afraid of repercussions as to what would happen for it. Furthermore, she said that there was more information that wasn't captured as a result of printing, and that's simply why it wasn't being captured appropriately, is because of the hard copies. Subsequent to this, the Canadian court dismissed the claim for pay in lieu of notice, and then required the employee to pay the time back for time theft. And, this is a really interesting topic because, again, I don't really typically see that. If you're seeing employees paying back employers for time, again, it's exceedingly rare. My thought here is that because the case was so cut and dry that it was time theft, that the employer decided to strike back as a result of this, and that's why they had to pay it back. Most companies don't really care. I mean, I suppose that if it was extreme, they would absolutely. But this was ultimately like just over $1,000 worth of time theft, which, grand scheme is not huge. But it's very interesting. If you're interested in this and more Canadian content, I'm south of the Canadian border. I'm in America based on my accent, but it's an interesting concept, and I'll definitely cover more as I have it. Thank you. That's about it for today in Human Resources for the People. If you like what you heard, like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye, guys.